St. Louis police, they were accused of killing an elderly grandfather while sleeping. This was during a raid. Now, this actually happened back in 2017. The family now has their resources together. They are now filing suit against the police department. A family in St. Louis has filed a federal lawsuit in response to a police raid that claimed the life of their loved one 4 years ago, okay? This is one of the most sad stories I've seen in a long time. In 2017, officers with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department Special Weapons and Tactics team unlawfully stormed into the home of Don Clark Sr. on a falsified no-knock search warrant and killed the 63-year-old Army veteran and grandfather who was suffering from vision and hearing loss, limited mobility, and a range of health issues. In federal court, Mr. Clark's children filed a lawsuit against St. Louis City and 21 named SLMPD officers alleging wrongful death and violations of the 4th and 14th Amendments. Let's get a picture of Mr. Clark Sr. That's him with some members of his family. According to the lawsuit, a SWAT team of more than 17 officers rammed into Clark's home while he was sleeping without prior warning. The officers lobbed a flashbang into his home and then shot at him at least 9 times, according to the lawsuit. A little more background. That night, Mr. Clark's residence was one of 3 homes on the South City block where no-knock warrants would be executed following SLMPD detective Thomas Strode's use of identical affidavits to apply for the warrants. That's a no-no, by the way, despite the fact that Mr. Clark had never been convicted of a crime. Mr. Clark, he's dead. He was asleep. This never should have happened to him. I want you to see another picture of Mr. Clark in his uniform, Justice for Don Clark Sr. The ArchCity Defender, they're leading this lawsuit against the city, against these police officers. I wonder, are we going to hear those who support military veterans come out and support Mr. Don Clark? Are they going to come out and say, this was a tragedy, this man served the nation and he was killed in his sleep by law enforcement. This is a tragedy, this has to stop. We need police reform now. We need to pass the George Floyd Policing and Accountability Act now. We need to get rid of no-knock warrants now. We need to disrupt the corruption in law enforcement now. But what are they saying? Nothing. They're not even talking about Mr. Don Clark Sr. They're not talking about this lawsuit, but we are. Let me go to the picture of him with his, I think, grandchild at Christmas. They killed a good man who already had compromised health. He was asleep. They raided his home. He did nothing illegal. Never at 63 years of age, as a black man in America, had never had issues with law enforcement until he went to sleep that night. We will follow this story. A federal suit has been filed. Woz, what are your thoughts about this case?
It's interesting to me because in America, this is kind of the land of, or we claim for it to be the land of accountability, right? People get sued, people get thrown in jail, people get this, people get that. For the dumbest things, by the way. We say, well, you need to be held responsible. Well, when a man's life gets taken away for absolutely no reason, as you mentioned with the shenanigans, with the affidavit, with the way, you can't tell me the way you guys carried out that warrant was by the book. So right. Who's paying the price for skirting the rules, not doing their job at every single turn throughout the process that ends in the murder of an innocent man? You know, like, who pays for that? Like, I'm sure, hopefully at the end of this lawsuit, some sort of financial damages and restitution will be paid to the family that this guy got left behind. But yo, this was a human life that was lost here. Who pays for that? You know, that's what comes to my mind, because for certain things we go and we look at, hey man, who hired the dude that issued the warrant? Who was with him? Who could have stopped it? Who could have this? For certain things, we do that level of sort of, scrutiny when there are things that are considered to be huge F-ups.
Yeah.
But these kinds of things in our society aren't considered to be huge mess ups. It's just the cost of doing business to certain people. And that's the saddest part about this, is that nobody's actually gonna have to pay for this.
Yeah, and that's the other side of the coin, where people all across this country should be outraged by this kind of action. Because let's say, for the sake of argument, let's say this was just extreme negligence. Well, that negligence didn't just show up for Mr. Clark. That negligence or disregard for human life exists in policing. It exists in that department. And this is not the first time they decided to bend the corners or take a shortcut. Not the first time. It may be the first time it became news, but it's not the first time they did it, this team, this SWAT team. And now you have a real question to answer. And this is the question: are you going to do something about policing in your city? Are you going to actually take up an advocacy position to make sure policing is better in your community? Because if you keep ignoring it, if you keep saying it just happens in silos, it does not happen as part of a systemic expression. If you keep doing that, you keep ignoring them knocking at your neighbor's door, they are going to knock at your door. And when they knock at your door, you're looking for everyone else to stand up with you and stand up for you. Well, where were you when they were knocking on everybody else's door? And that's what's happening. Policing as a culture is simply getting out of control. People are dying. Now, many would push back and say, well, Rashad, look at what happened in this encounter. If the black person would have did this, if they just would have done that, if they just would have turned left rather than turn right, whatever it is, right? What can you say about Mr. Clark? If Mr. Clark would not have been sleeping that hard, he would have woke up and realized he was being shot. What are you going to say about Mr. Clark? Nothing. You don't get more peaceful than being asleep and 63 years old. This man was killed because of bad and criminally negligent policing. And what happens next? Is there a policy change? Is there a new direction in policing? Or do we continue to politicize the matter and act like it's a Dems versus Republican conversation?
Yeah, if recent history is any indication, nothing will probably come of this. And I think what people need to bear in mind is that the cops are sort of carrying out the initiatives of the people who are well-to-do in our society, right? Because it's on them. It's on the well-to-doers, the people who don't have to worry about no-knock warrants being served at their house in order to change this, until those people wake up and be like, hold on, this is wrong. This is messed up, because we see it every time, right? Like, I think the prime example of what we're talking about, Dr. Richey, when it comes to how we sort of prosecute what we consider to be crimes, is the opioid epidemic.
Yep.
All of a sudden, when it's touching a certain type of person, a certain type of neighborhood, it's like, hold on, we need care, we need empathy. We need to treat these people like human beings all of a sudden. But when there was a crack epidemic, we did something different. So, I'm afraid to say it, but like, until well-to-do people are affected by this, nothing's gonna change.
You make an amazing point that I completely agree with. We criminalized crack addicts and we said those on opioids are patients. When the truth is, they were all worthy of our compassion and worthy of care and wraparound services from the beginning. Addiction can be treated. But brother, once again, I try to do what I can do to warn people. You have to work as a coalition. And I'm talking about everybody, not just black folk. I'm talking about black folk, brown folk, white folk. We have to work together as a unified front to disrupt the madness that we see taking place in the United States of America.